Hello, everyone. Good morning. You are watching, listening, whatever you're doing to Sunday Talks with Kelly and Lisa. I am the Kelly portion of that equation. And
Hello, I'm Lisa.
yay. Um, we are talking today about things we inherit. And when I mentioned this to someone this morning, they said, oh, like hair color and eye color. No, that's not what we're talking about. Yes, you do inherit those things, but what we're talking about today are those other things that we inherit. um, I had a conversation with someone earlier in the week, and every once in a while, I get into a family dynamic where I will do readings for the parents, the children, the grandchildren. And this is one of those situations where everyone in the family, I know them, I've done readings for them. And this woman was talking about how everything just happens to her. She's just constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And why do these things happen to her? And because I'm familiar with the family dynamics, I said, you might want to ask your grandmother. And she said, what? Like, that's something that we inherit, our viewpoints, how we look at life. Some of those things are really good. If you come from a family that was supportive and optimistic and positive, yay. Maybe this isn't your show, but most of us don't. At least most of the people that I am familiar with don't. So what do you think?
This has been a theme that's come up for me all week long.
Mhm.
And I guess that depends on what you consider Sunday. Do you consider Sunday the start of your week or the end of your week? It has come up for me all week long. I'm currently doing some mindset training, and I've been listening to some training videos. And in like the last three of those, the whole ancestral bond and breaking some of the curses, as you call them, has been a theme of those trainings. And I've talked to several people myself. I have my podcast coming up next week. That episode talking about generational stuff that's, passed down from one to another. Some
Yep.
of it's inherited, some of it we actually learn.
Yeah.
And because, that parent did it to the grandparent, did it to all the way back.
Yeah.
So it's just been a recurring theme. And I'm glad that we're talking about this. I really am.
Well, it is a lot to do with mindset. Um, when I work with coaching clients, one of the things that I have them do is write me a description of their parents. And the
Okay.
reason I do that is because a lot of people don't realize what we inherit truly from our parents. You mentioned generational curses. I'm actually working on a book about that right now.
Oh,
And
neat.
there are things that were passed down generations from generations and generations ago, where somebody way back when made a really poor decision, and it's just been regurgitated through generations. There was in my family history, there was an ancestor who died whipping a horse in the rain. He was struck by lightning. And
Oh,
my thought, even as a kid, when I first heard this story, was karma, don't hit horses, But beyond that, it was more what I watched other family members get from that story. I've always been pro animal. I don't care what it is. I'm going to root for the animal. It doesn't matter.
same.
But other people in my family were taking different things from this, about how don't go out in the rain, don't try to garden in there. He was plowing a field. Don't do that in the rain. And my thing was don't whip the horse. Theirs was
Right.
don't go out in the rain. So for a long time, I wondered why people in my family were afraid of rain.
Mm.
And it isn't a conscious choice that they made. But when you dig into it, why are you afraid of the rain? Oh, I don't know. Somebody told me not to go out in the rain. Well, that was handed down from generation to generation. Now, I grew up in an area of the country with fantastic thunderstorms, and I love them. but so many other people don't. And that
Right.
was one of the things that made me start really investigating what we really inherit as far as mindset and little stories that we just take as truth. And you, in the larger scheme of things, I can find no evidence whatsoever that that ever happened. There's nothing in a paper. There's nothing written down. I cannot find any proof that that ever happened. But it's interesting because my family accepts it as truth.
They may have even inherited that story from a different family and
Right.
adapted it into your own family,
Right.
right? It doesn't even have to necessarily be something that happened to somebody in your lineage. So
Right.
I know for me, my parents live with me. They're elderly. They're both 85, so I'm raising my parents. My dad has been telling a lot of stories as he has early onset dementia, so he's definitely sharing a lot from what he
Right.
remembers from his past, and it's a lot more clear than I remember growing up. So I've been listening to some of these stories, and I hear from him. He remembers his great grandfather. He remembers his grandfather. He remembers
Yeah.
his father, because they were all very early in age when they started having multiple babies and families and whatnot. So he does remember a lot about that, and listening to him and the stories and the attitudes and the behaviors that were passed down from one to another has been very interesting, and it's
Yeah.
actually helped me clear a lot. I'm very grateful for this situation that I am in, because it does help me clear a lot. But get to know your parents, and you can see what they are passing down, what has been passed down to them, especially if you don't have a lot of written information
Right.
about your ancestors. I don't have a lot of information. We always heard, we're Russian, Czechoslovakian. Well, what did that mean? And as we've been doing a little bit more research, we were never Russia. We were just part of USSR. Like, so you have to really look at
Right.
all these different dynamics. And if you don't have that information, pay attention to the people around you. I bet some of the things you hear are things that have been passed down.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way we look at things, there are families that are incredibly supportive. Like I said earlier, that was not my experience growing up. So if you are one of those people that grew up in a family where there was constant bickering, there was constant putting each other down. In a couple of instances, I was in a situation where we were sort of pitted against each other. It wasn't just
Mhm.
that siblings couldn't get along. It was we were pitted against each other. Oh, we're not going to go to the movies? Go ask your brother why. So
Mm.
those kinds of things, when you catch yourself, and really you have to be conscious in order to catch yourself. But many of us, we just say things or we do things, automatic pilot. It's just automatic. It just flows out. And we don't think about the damage we may be causing and even to ourselves. So if you were in a family where you were not supported, where you were like, I was made fun of a lot because I could always see things and hear things that nobody else could see and hear. So what happened with me, I didn't turn those gifts off. I cut my family off.
Okay.
I just, here, let me just go climb in a tree over here and I'll be fine. And in working with clients, I've learned a lot of us did that. We find a way to cope with it, even if it is not a healthy way that we're coping. So look at what you're saying and what you do that you're not really consciously thinking about when you're saying or doing them. And I bet you can probably trace it back to, I said some, I don't remember what it was right now, but I said something last year when my daughter was here. And she looked at me and she went, Nanny just came out of your mouth. And I thought that was hilarious because what I said was exactly something that my grandmother always said. And when I
Okay.
was a kid, I would laugh at her for saying it. And, for my daughter to point that out, I was like, oh, wow.
If you hear somebody tell you you're turning into one of your parents, you're probably carrying some of the behaviors that might not necessarily be a good one. And I'm not saying that was your case, but you said listen to what you say and stop and analyze that. And you could probably pick up on some of the things that you were taught by your caregivers.
Yeah, particularly if you're going through a really tough time right now. That's usually when those things come out.
Yeah.
Um, if you grew up hearing, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. All of those kinds of negative things, particularly when they're said around kids, not even to a child, but if a child is overhearing that kind of stuff, that's what you grow up believing,
Yeah.
so watch that, especially if you're one of those people. And I talked to someone actually yesterday who was like, I can't believe my life. I can't believe my life. Everything is bad. Everything is bad. Everything is dark. Everything is horrible. I should just off myself. And I'm like, whoa, 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 back up, reverse, because nothing is ever that bad.
Right.
But in speaking with this person, well, I grew up hearing my mom say that. My mother was always saying I should just die.
Oh my
Well,
God.
yeah,
Mhm.
you were a kid. That's what you heard,
Yeah.
even with relationships. We were talking about relationships last week, but even relationships, it's how many times have you heard someone say, you just married your father or you just married your mother?
Yep. Yep.
And that's what we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed this, like I said, this past week has been a theme of this ancestral bond, the things that we carry from our past generations. And for me, I don't know a lot about my family history. It was just little bits and pieces. I know that my dad and my mom's par grandparents, excuse me, came over from the motherland. I
Mhm.
don't even 100% know what the motherland is, but they came over here. So some of my um, great aunts and uncles were born overseas, and some of them were born here in the United States. I do know that there are ways that you can work on healing those curses if
Mhm.
you don't know much about your family.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that for a little bit? Because, like I said, it's been a theme and I've been working on it myself to try to fix some of the stuff that I have carried. And we're probably going to go some very interesting topics here because I'm being reminded of a conversation actually that you and I had years ago. I was still in San Antonio. We were doing this show. Actually, I think it was Transform Your Life with
I think
Kelly
it
and
was,
Lisa
yeah.
way back then. I wanna say, like, 2017, 2018, and I was in a relationship that was chaotic, but not it wasn't wild fights, it wasn't, beating each other or screaming at each other. It was really chaotic because I think both of our souls were at serious unrest.
Right.
And I remember you and I were talking about how this person and I had traveled through many lives together. And one of the things that you had mentioned was something that he did to me in my past. Now, I used to have a birthmark on my thigh. Let me say, I used to have a birthmark on my thigh from where the situation from my past was showing on my physical present. But
Mhm.
once I healed something, I don't even know what I healed. I no longer have that birthmark. I don't know that birthmarks are supposed to go away because I still have all the moles and stuff, but the birthmark went away. So healing some of our own stuff that we bring into this existence, as well as trying to heal those generational things, it really is definitely it's clearing and it helps this current existence.
It does. And
Totally kind of went off on a tangent there.
no, that's fine. Um, the thing about healing, you can, the phrase is uncreate and delete. You can, and I did this when I was going through a really dark time. And I did this last year when I died too. You can say, it is my intention to uncreate and delete everything that has harmed my soul, everything that has held me back, everything that has caused illness, whatever you want to say. And then no, you don't have to remember something to heal it. You know, a lot of the time, people are wounded very early in life.
Yeah.
You don't consciously remember that usually. You can still heal it. You can just heal anything that needs to be healed. And what I have done repeatedly through my adult life is I'm healing. I'm deciding I don't want to carry these wounds with me.
Yeah.
I want to heal them. I want to move on without them. The thing is, you have to set your intention that this is what
Right.
you're going to do. It doesn't matter if you say, I want to uncreate and delete anything. That's something that we use. I use that with clients when I'm doing past life regressions or Akashic record reading. All of that stuff is kind of pickier about what you say, but anyone can heal at any time. You don't have to do a big ritual. A lot of people like doing rituals, even if it's something simple like just lighting a candle and, that's your
Right.
whole thing. Um, but you can heal anything at any time without remembering it. I talked about that a lot in my first book, that you don't have to remember. Sometimes we go through a period of time where we think we want to remember, and we do things like soul retrievals or past life regressions or intense therapy, and it ends up kind of bringing up more that needs to be healed, that is very painful. And I really do think, and I've had many long conversations with people who are actual therapists. I am not. And we've kind of come to the same conclusion. In some cases, if you have a particularly traumatic, abusive, almost said transbusive, I don't know what that is, but a traumatic life, something that was really, really kind of gut-wrenching pain, especially if you were a kid at the time. Um, you don't need to remember that to heal it. Why put yourself through that? Let the memories surface. Look at them. That was ugly, and
Yeah.
I'm healing that. And I'm thinking of one particular person who was the child of an alcoholic, and talking about hereditary,
Yes.
things like abusive personalities are run in families. Doesn't matter what the abuse is or what the addiction is, that runs in families. My abusive first marriage, his father was abusive, his grandfather was, those things run in families too. So don't think you have to torture yourself by digging up every memory of every
Right.
occasion. Lump them together. I'm here it is. I'm healing it now. You don't have to torture yourself. And I think that sometimes that's what we think we have to do. Mm-mm, you know,
You mentioned an interesting point because I was reminded the alcoholic aspect definitely does trigger memories for me. My dad remembers being 8 years old and being placed on top of the bar that my family at one point owned. And, like that's what was common.
yep.
Give the kid a drink. We're Russian. We're, these, like, it's in our genes. We are drinkers, and that's carried through generations. And
It
it's,
is.
interesting that that's something that you brought up because that's very specific to my lineage. But one thing that we can also do is just remember to honor the people who came before us. It might not have been the best, it might not have been the prettiest, but given the time that they were in or the circumstances that they were also in, they really were doing the best that they could with what they had. Yes, they could have done better. We all could have done better.
Always.
Hindsight is absolutely
Yep.
that glass, that looking glass that we can't go back and fix. But, you know, you can at least honor and be grateful that they did the best that they could with what they had. And I like rituals. I like the consistency that helps me to remember, and it helps me to not get off of the bandwagon or do any backsliding.
Right.
One thing you can do is every morning, add it to your routine to just honor them and thank them for what they did to have that survival. Because if they didn't survive, you wouldn't be here.
You know, I was fighting actually with my mother. I didn't do that very often because I don't like to upset people. And she was always, it was always walking on eggshells around her because
Mm,
drop of a dime, she would be upset. And I had an all out fight with her one time. And she said, "But you lived."
mm,
And I went, "Huh, yeah, okay. Thanks for that. Gotta go now." Yeah. But it's important to look at, and I'm not saying it's an excuse, it is not an
right.
excuse,
Right.
but it is important to look at what these people went through. You know, I literally have ancestors that came across in covered wagons and were attacked by Indians. You know, it's like that is also a pain that is forwarded down through the generations. But you have to look at that. You know, if you have a parent who lost a parent when they were very young, or had an abusive situation when they were very young, or they were so poor there were days they didn't eat when they were very young, you have to understand that shaped who they are.
Right.
A lot of us have grandparents who, or great grandparents for me anyway, who went through the depression.
Yes. Yep.
That changed their whole personalities.
Yep.
And you have to look at it. Maybe that's the reason they were yelling at you for not finishing your plate, or for ripping, not changing into play clothes when you came home from school. That was a big one for my grandmother. You have to change clothes when you don't wear your school clothes out playing. And it was
Right.
because they didn't
Yep.
have that. They didn't have extra stuff.
Yep.
So look at that when you're uncovering your own wounds, and really figure out how you can still honor these people.
Exactly.
It may be that it's too soon for you to really do that. I have a couple of clients right now, coaching clients, that it's too soon for them to really open up to seeing their parent as anything other than their abuser right now.
Right.
But they'll get there, and you will get there. And that's the whole thing, is don't rush it. You know, understand that it's going to take you some time to heal certain wounds. You know, these are people that were supposed to be your biggest love and support and caregivers. And any relationship that becomes abusive with someone that you love is really tough to get over. Cut yourself some slack, take the time.
And it is very difficult to work through that and to give the forgiveness to help heal yourself. One thing I like to suggest to people is pick somebody who was there in a loving and supportive role. It doesn't have to be the biological DNA giver that you're connecting that with. You can find an adult and reflect on that and hold that to your heart while you're going through your healing process, because love is love and it's out there,
Yeah,
even if it's not necessarily from the people that we think it should be from or that it should be from. It is out there and you can still use that in your healing process.
yeah. And while you're healing from wounds that you incurred, make sure you're not passing them on.
Right,
A
that's a big
big
one.
a big piece of this is, while you're healing, you need to look at what you're doing.
Yep.
You know, you can pass on anything generationally. Don't pass on the hurt, don't pass on the pain. If you're going to pass on anything, pass on the healing. It's really, really important. Right now, so many people are so stressed and just going through stuff.
Yep.
It's really scary in some places of this country right now, what people are going through.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
so, you know, look around you. Send love out. Don't send out judgment. We've got enough of that. Thank you very much. Um, Make it while you're healing you, make sure you're passing that around. Even if you don't know someone, and we all do this. You can look at someone and say, "Oh, they're having a rough day." Instead of just saying, "Oh, they're having a rough day," say, "I'm sending this person peace, calm, whatever they
Yeah.
need right now." That is just an easy thing to get into the practice of doing. I actually got into that practice a long time ago. And it's always humorous to me when I hear my daughter repeat things that I told her. I'm like, yeah, but be conscious of what's around you.
Yeah.
So you can pass that on too.
One thing I like to do is compliment people. I was walking down the street the other day, in this cute little area where you can walk down the street. I was walking down the street and there was a gentleman who was working at a parking garage to for paid parking for an event that was taking place where I was. So he was there to collect to make sure that the resident was actually living there or whatever. Well, he had a really nice bald head. And I know it sounds really simple, but I walked past him and I stopped and I turned around and I said, "You have a really nice shaped head. Your haircut or lack thereof looks really good on you." And he just lit up from ear to ear. He was like, "What is happening right now? Thank you so much." And you know what? I don't know what that person was going through. He could
Right.
be on just this high on life. He might not have a lot of problems that he carries with him, but just the simple little complimenting people. I've definitely gotten into doing that a lot more lately.
Yeah. I have a particularly loud shirt that I wear on occasion. And I live in a very, very, very conservative area with farmers and ranchers, and they just don't see things like that very
Right.
often. And I was feeling particularly brave one day, and I decided I would wear that shirt to the grocery store. And I noticed this little tiny, she's probably maybe 5 foot,
Okay.
silvery gray hair. And I saw her every row I went down, every aisle I went down, there she was. And it's like she was following me through the store. And finally, I turned around and I said, "Hello, do I know you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just following the light. I love
Oh,
her." And it just made me feel so good because it was not what I expected.
right.
I expected her to say, "How can you wear," something negative. And she was just so, "I'm just following it." And that's the
That's so
most
cute.
beautiful thing, and I, yay, thank you. But it really did. And I was having a good day to begin with. I was out of the house. With all the animal stuff that I have going on here, it doesn't happen very often where I can
Right.
leave the house leisurely. I have to get back in 2 hours to feed kittens or doctor somebody or give somebody a shot. And this was a great day to begin with. And she just made it that much better. So never underestimate the power of a random compliment. It really, really does make people feel good.
It really does. And because you never know what somebody's going through. You never know what generational baggage they're dealing with,
Right.
in their life at that moment. And at the early beginning of the show, you had mentioned this woman who's always the shoe is going to drop, the shoe is going to
Yep.
drop, waiting, 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 because the shoes are always going to drop. And you know what? They are. We're in the human experience.
Yep.
There is going to be things that test us, that push us to our limits, that help us expand and grow. We call them bad. We call them, chaos, or these experiences that we're going through are seen more in a bad light, but they're teaching experiences if we shape our mind to allow them to be. Things are going to happen. Things are absolutely going to happen. You're going
Yep.
to have shoes that drop. It's
Yep.
just part of being a human. And
Yep.
particularly in this timeline, like, oh my
Yeah.
God, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
But that's a whole other conversation. We
Yeah.
won't we won't talk about that. But there are things that you're gonna experience. The way that you react to them goes back to that generational
Yeah.
stuff,
Yes,
what
it
you've
does.
learned, what you've inherited, what has been carried through. So let's talk about some ways that we can actually heal or change our perspective on some of those? I know I have a couple of ideas in
Yeah.
mind.
One of the things that I went through, my family was very, very closed off from society in general.
Okay.
They didn't talk to anybody, didn't make eye contact, like they were walking around afraid of people. And when I realized I was doing that and where it came from, I just started randomly going around, hi, hi. And it was silly and it made me laugh, but it also got me out of that people are going to hurt you thing that
Right.
I was taught. So, do something silly to kind of shake things up. Don't make it a chore, make it fun, but you have to be conscious to realize you're doing it. Yeah.
I told you that I have been doing trainings every day for almost the last 30 days. I just listened to something for 45 minutes in the morning, and then I journal about the ahas that I have taken from whatever I'm listening to. The ancestral stuff has come up quite a bit, particularly in the last week. So, one of the things that I have started allowing myself to do, I mentioned I love rituals. I want to know that this is something I need to do, and then this, and then this. I'm a checklist kind of person. Give me that structure, give me that guideline. Let me check off the blocks that I've done it. I have ADHD, so I really need something that's gonna just keep me on track. So
Right.
I do like rituals. One thing that you can do to heal the ancestral stuff is, we said, honor the people who came before you. And one way you can do that, if you have anything, any type of heirloom that you have inherited from your ancestors, keep them in a collective spot. And in the beginning of your morning, after you've done your showering or whatever, before you really, really set foot into the rest of your day that might cause you some chaos or anxiety, like going to work, for example, just go to those objects and just touch each one and just thank them so much for, what they did for your ancestors, for your grandparents, your great grandparents, or whatever, to thank them, to honor them for what they have done.
Right.
That way, you're healing part of whatever it was that you carried with you.
The big thing about gratitude is that it will heal everything.
Mhm.
You have to remember that things that you have gone through in your life, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, have happened for you,
Yeah.
not to you. And when you switch that way of thinking, it's easier to become grateful for it. But everything you've gone through has made you who you are right now.
Mhm.
Um, I think about that a lot. It just, I haven't had a real happy, easygoing life. It really has been. I have friends that go, "My God, how can you do this?" Again, what is going on? And it's just years and years ago, I adopted "this is happening for me." I don't understand it, not particularly fond of it, don't really like it, but I have to accept this is happening for me. uh, that started changing the way that I thought. Um, it's really important to be grateful for everything you've gone through. Everybody goes through stuff. Your ancestors went through stuff. I have talked to a lot of people about ancestry, and I can tell you there are very, very, very few people that have the weird ancestry that I have. But it's still important. I like the things, thanking them, associating some inherited thing with them. I don't have much of that, but what I have, and I may raise some eyebrows here, but in my family, my great grandmother had a portrait of her great, I think two greats for her. Yeah, because it's four greats for me. Grandfather, just a portrait in a frame, and she had it on her wall. And my mom, when she was little, said, "I want that picture." And she said, "That's Herman. Here, you can have him." Well, she didn't just give him the picture, she gave her Herman. My family is sort of like a cross between the Munsters and the Addams family in many,
Okay.
many instances. And we have a very strong connection with our ancestors. And I have Herman now.
Oh,
When
nice.
I was grown, and my mother was like, she's getting rid of things. She's just, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need this. And she says, you want Herman? And I said, yeah. And I took the portrait, and the first night that picture was hanging on my wall, I was married at the time to a man who believed in none of this. And he wakes up and, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And he saw the ghost of Herman walking down the hallway in our house.
Nice.
So in my family, things that we've inherited may or may not be, things, but
Physical.
I'm still grateful that I have the portrait and the spirit guide. So my ancestry is very much, that's a common thing in my family. But you do need to be grateful. In my family, it's like, you just saw that, didn't you? And we would take great glee in bringing friends over to my mom's house just so they could see what was that.
Is that Herman?
But that was our entertainment as kids, because all of us, being psychic, being aware, being awake, whatever you want to call it, runs in my family very, very, very strongly. And I haven't met too many other people who can trace it back through their generations. But it's kind of cool. I enjoy it. It's definitely made me who I am. I have a client who's
Yeah.
their family, they were metal workers. What a cool thing,
Mhm.
and through the generations, they taught the kids how to deal with metal. And I have some beautiful metal sculptures that this client made for me. That's his lineage. So whatever it is for you, embrace it, enjoy it. It's maybe not always positive, and I can tell you there's a lot of times I've been really, really bullied because of my family. And you just have to kind of say, well, they don't understand.
Right.
They don't understand. If I didn't grow up in this house, I'd be afraid of this house too. And whatever it is for you, just know that it's okay. It's who you are. So be grateful
And
for
you
it.
don't have to have things, you can have some memories,
Right.
pick those good memories,
Yeah.
of your grandparents if you had them when you were younger, with even your parents today, you can still bring them in. I know I do a lot of women's empowerment and I'm in a lot of women's circles, so breaking some of the things that have been carried from generation to generation, particularly for women, is something that, working with doing meditations. Before you do your meditations, call in your ancestors. You don't know what they look like? That's okay. Just
Yeah.
imagine a set of hands and just make that set of hands their hands. Call in memories and, bring them in and say, thank you so much. It's almost like healing your inner child. Thank you
Right.
so much for what you did for us to
Yeah.
be here, for our families. We honor you, we love you, and the sacrifice, you no longer have to continue to sacrifice. I'm breaking that now. And then go into your meditation or your visualization or, whatever practice it is that you're doing at that time. So it doesn't even have to be something physical. You can still call them in and thank them and tell them the sacrifice is ending, and that you're working on breaking that.
The big thing that I want to remind people is when you're calling in your ancestors, don't be afraid when they show up for you. Um, People come through in different ways. And it may be a feeling you get, like you're home alone and you know you're alone and yet you feel someone around you. Don't automatically be afraid of that. A lot of the times it's going to be an ancestor. It could be, ancestors you never knew. But don't automatically freak out and think, oh my God, I'm being attacked by demons. You're not, I promise you. That I've done paranormal investigations for years. That is so rare. It isn't even 1% of 1% of the time. So just, who are you? You know, if you must ask anything, who are you? Or you can say, you're here to help me. Yay. You know, don't be afraid. And don't be afraid of things that come up. Lately, with the energies that we're having, planetary alignments, I can go on further. That's a whole other show. But it's really common for people who have never seen anything out of the ordinary. Their lives have been just plot, 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 to all of a sudden be experiencing things. If that's you, it's okay. It's okay. You know, it really is okay. But so many people are starting to, what we say, wake up, which doesn't
Yeah.
really make a lot of sense to a lot of people. I know that. But you're just becoming more spiritually aware.
Yeah.
So let it happen. Don't fight it. You know, don't be afraid of it. It's a process. You'll get there. You'll be fine, really. And most likely these days, it is ancestors coming to help you, coming to guide you, coming to lend support that maybe you never had in your life. You know, so accept it. Be grateful for it.
Well, and they want to heal it too. So if they're there, they want to help you and guide you.
Yep.
So trying to fix the curses that they left behind.
Yep.
I don't see anybody. I don't have those experiences. I just call on them to just, for me, it's almost imaginary because I don't have the experiences, but I still know that even internally, deep down in my cells, I'm fixing it. So
Yeah, you are. Yeah, and you have to kind of embrace your imagination sometimes. If you are not someone who is prone to seeing spirit or, talking to them on a regular basis, use your imagination. I don't know
yes.
what you looked like. I never knew you in my life, but here's my mental picture of you. Or you can make it a color or a shape or a light, whatever resonates with you. But know that your ancestors are around you, even if you have to imagine what they look like. They're there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything else, Tay?
I don't. I don't.
I think we've pretty much exhausted that topic. That was
Yeah.
really, really good. That was
It's definitely a good conversation. I know the world is hurting, and this is one way that you can help it. I actually, now that I think about it, I do have one thing to say.
sure.
We talked about stop passing it on,
Yeah.
and that's, let's just wrap up with stop passing it on. That is one way to break the curse. One way to honor your ancestors is to recognize when you're doing something that is not necessarily beneficial and just
Yeah.
stop, try to stop doing that.
One little tip with that is to flip it into gratitude. When you find yourself, and I have a client who just had her third child not long ago. So she's still going through the postpartum thing. And
Oh yeah.
she called the other day and she says, what do I do? Right now I hate my kid. And I'm like, you don't hate your kid. You love your children, And she said, well, when I was little, I dreamt about having kids. I wanted 3 kids so badly. I was an only child. I didn't have siblings. And now I have my 3 children and I should be happy. And I'm like, okay, first off, understand what you've just done. You
Right.
just built a human being in your body and pushed it out.
Yes. Yes.
Give yourself credit for that. But flip it into gratitude. I'm grateful my dream came true.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what your dream was, if it was having kids or buying a new car, it doesn't really matter what your dream was. Be grateful that you have the dream and can make it come true. So
That's
that's
a beautiful way to end the show.
thank you. Thank you guys for sticking with us through this one. This has been longer than our last several, but it really, I hope, gives you something to think about and some things that are helpful. So thanks so much for watching and listening. Please subscribe to the channel. Please share
Please.
the show. Yeah,
Please.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.